Welcome, everybody. We wanted to talk with the team from freshbenies and the team from WellVia about this partnership that we started a year ago and how well it's going today. We had worked with a couple different telehealth vendors over the last 12 years. But when we were considering a year and 2 and 3 years ago, whether we would work with a different telehealth vendor, we had some very specific criteria that we knew were going to be vital. We knew that they needed to be big enough and experienced enough to have learned the necessary lessons, to have built a smooth process that was working the way it needed to work in today's telehealth marketplace. We knew that we wanted a partner who had strong, modern technology. And by modern, I mean in the last few years, not 10-year-old technology, because we knew from a member experience standpoint, we wanted to tap that technology to have a better member experience through the app and portal. And we weren't seeing that with our other telehealth vendors. And we wanted to see if there were other things that a vendor would have that would provide a smoother onboarding experience, because we've known over the last decade that the biggest point of challenge for many members is on that very first visit. And if that's burdensome, it dramatically stops that up. John, do you want to tell us about how it turned out that WellVia was the perfect vendor for us because of those criteria?
Yeah, for WellVia, our approach has always been to have a transparent partnership, to understand what is needed in the marketplace, and having partners such as freshbenies to be able to kind of take what we consider our strengths and apply them with a partner was really kind of what brought us to the next level after our initial conversation. Having that open dialogue, what freshbenies is looking for, what we have, let's test it, and let's kind of tailor something that really does work because we have the ability to do so.
And WellVia's stats or credibility comes from the fact that you've been in business now for a number of years. You've got over 4 million plus members on the books. You've learned those lessons. We're totally impressed with your technical capabilities, how smooth it's been to integrate with you, and are very thankful of finding that with you. Plus, you have a much smoother onboarding process with that newest member. And WellVia's stats or credibility comes from the fact that you've been in business now for a number of years. You've got over 4 million plus members on the books. You've learned those lessons. We're totally impressed with your technical capabilities, how smooth it's been to integrate with you, and are very thankful of finding that with you. Plus, you have a much smoother onboarding process with that newest member.
Sure. So at WellVia, we have technology that makes it easier for the patient as well as the physician. So the first appointment is not burdensome. So they feel like they can get on the conversation pretty quickly once they start the process. And they usually get a phone call. Our stats are very good. They usually get a phone call back from the physician within 10 minutes. And the first experience is so important to make sure they understand how to use their telemedicine company and that they have a good experience so that they continue to use it. If you have a difficulty getting on your first call, it's very unlikely you're going to try it again.
You don't require a long health profile before that first visit, right?
Sure, no, absolutely. In order to get on WellVia, we need basic information, your allergies, your medication, but we don't need an extensive medical history. If there's anything important the physician needs to know for that particular issue, they can ask.
What states do you work in, and what specialties do you represent?
So we work in all 50 states. Whatever we can legally do, we have in-house legal to make sure we stay legal with all our physicians. WellVia has internal medicine, emergency medicine, pediatrician. We also have behavioral health, which is something we added a couple years ago. Perfect timing to have right now, definitely. And we have the ability to have a dermatology section as well.
And that's all just part of your normal service that we work with you on. So
yes, yes.
Dr. Sauerwein, will you give us a background on how you've built your provider network, your network criteria for selecting physicians, and how you train them?
That's a very good question. So I think that's the thing that we strive for at WellVia, is to have very well-trained physicians in the telemedicine realm. Not every medicine doctor is built to be a telemedicine doctor. So we want to find the best of the best. And now with the pandemic, so many patients and physicians want to get into telemedicine. So the way we go about it is you have to be board certified and you need to be working in your specialty. So pediatricians taking care of kids, adult internal medicine taking care of adults, and family medicine, of course, and and emergency medicine doctors. So it's very important for us to have board certified doctors working in their specialty. We also have an extensive credentialing committee to make sure that the NCQA, everything is up to date, and we re-credential as well, checking for malpractice and any issues there may be. So not only do we get to choose our physicians, because right now we have an excess of physicians, so we don't want to be reactive when we need physicians. We want to be proactive. So we get as many physicians as we need. We watch our metrics weekly to see if there's any states we need to increase physicians, if there's any inkling that we're not having the response time we want. And then we have a wait list that we can start bringing those physicians from. So I think it's very important you mentioned training as well. We have videos that physicians go through to train of how to go through a telemedicine consult. Our technology is actually extremely quite straightforward. So the technology, there's not a lot of training that has to go into that for either side, the patient or the physician. But we do also get feedback. We give monthly feedback to all our physicians. They get an email with their patient satisfactions and any quotes the patients may want to share with a physician. I think that's really helpful because our physicians, they like getting that monthly feedback. It makes them feel good, especially now. They really do feel like their work is important. We always have, but never more so than this past year.
Will you tell us what you did, what happened to you when the coronavirus first hit last year, and how did you have to respond from an operational standpoint? It was a heavy time for you.
That's an excellent question. So definitely when coronavirus hit March of last year, our numbers went up quite quickly. A lot of scared people, a lot of anxious individuals. And so we have the provider team, we have the network, we rallied our troops. I'm a very hands-on chief medical officer, so I started taking more consults as needed. All of our physicians did. And we were able to meet the demands without a problem. We also had a lot of recruitment. So many physicians wanted to get in telemedicine at that time. So we recruited the ones that we wanted, and we also had a wait list for ones that we didn't need quite yet for different states that we were full in.
As a result, very quickly, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but by April 1st, the wait times that had just dramatically shot up were already coming way back down, right?
Absolutely. Our wait times were never really compromised with the coronavirus pandemic when it first hit in March, because we have backup physicians. We have internal recruitment for our physicians, and then we have more physicians that we can use at our disposal at any time. So we can ramp up throughout the year at any moment to meet the demands, and exactly what we had to do last March.
And it's a rather basic question, but it is vitally important. And that is, what states do you work in and what specialties do you represent?
So we work in all 50 states, whatever we can legally do. We have in-house legal to make sure we stay legal with all our physicians. We work in all 50 states. And what was the second part of the question, Reed? WellVia has internal medicine, emergency medicine, pediatrician. We also have behavioral health, which is something we added a couple years ago. Perfect timing to have right now, definitely. And we have the ability to have a dermatology section as well.
And that's all just part of your normal service that we work with you on. So
yes, the acute care setting, exactly. So we have acute care WellVia and we have behavioral health WellVia.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to tell us about behavioral health? How's it looking here now, a year later from coronavirus first hitting?
So I think there's a saying, you build it, they will come, something to go along with that. So we happened to build behavioral health right in time. So we built it a couple years ago just to have a whole WellVia. So take care of the person as well as their mental health. And, obviously with the pandemic, people not being able to get in offices, our behavioral health shot up and we were able to recruit counselors and psychiatrists to meet the demand. So we're very, very thankful that we already have it in place. We have a quality assurance team for both our acute care and our behavioral health. And we do believe that we treat people as individuals and have the highest standard of care there is in telemedicine.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark, I'd like to ask you about your background and your role within WellVia and how you're keeping the broker's perspective in mind in your development of your team.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mark Woolrig, Chief Operating Officer here at WellVia, ultimately responsible for distribution across the country and the significant growth that Kate spoke about earlier. I too share the sentiment that our future is quite bright and intense growth has been happening really year over year since inception almost 7 years ago, but specifically intensified given the pandemic. My background before, I've been at WellVia in my position for about 3 years now, a little over 3 years. Prior to that, owned and operated my own supplemental TPA. We served about 500,000 lives on our platform. And so I'd like to think, and I'm hopeful that our partners share the sentiment that I understand the broker's needs and therefore the team understands the broker's needs as to flexibility, whether it be plan design, whether it be service offerings. You asked a question earlier about where do we see ourselves going in the future. We wake up every morning and work really hard to serve our clients in an exceptional manner. And I think we do a fine job of that. And our stats that with some of them that we talked about earlier prove that week in, week out, and day out. But at the same time, whether it be our entrance into population health management or virtual primary care, I describe WellVia as really this ball of clay, if you will, that sure, it serves your basic needs and the telemedicine definition that everybody knows now. The pandemic's been very helpful for telemedicine, and that, in my opinion, I think telemedicine this past year has become a household word, a household name. If you will. People are really starting to understand it, whether it be folks who couldn't get in to see their doctor because brick and mortars were closed because of the pandemic, whether it be an acceptance of physicians to use telemedicine as a viable option. And within that development, being able to go into areas where telemedicine is evolving. And we're able to do that because we do own and operate everything that we do. Everything that we have is proprietary. So when we need to tweak something, we can. When we need to develop something, we can. When we need to come up with customized plan designs to fit your team's needs, we can and we have. And so, making it as easy for a broker and for distribution to where you're not the standard round peg in a square hole and you get what you get and don't throw a fit from a plan design perspective, and then take that a step forward from an implementation and onboarding perspective, as we talked about earlier in the conversation, and making that as seamless as possible is really a key ingredient of ours. That's why we have a 99% customer satisfaction rate. We have a 99.2% customer retention rate. We talked about that first experience in telemedicine, whether it be with WellVia or whether it be period, and engaging in telemedicine regardless of the vendor for your first time ever. Well, our stats show that if I can get you to use telemedicine one time in a year and you have a successful and a happy experience, you're going to use it on average 3 times a year. Well, that's good for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Mandy, you manage all of our existing groups. And so you've been working with the groups and the members that have installed with WellVia over the last year, and it's thousands of lives now. How's the interaction been with them?
Been really smooth. So when we started the transition from over to WellVia, it was incredible to walk through that and watch how easy it was for not only the broker and for our team, but most importantly for the member. It was pretty seamless. So in the middle of this, we also rolled out single sign-on at freshbenies, and that made it significantly easier. There was no need for multiple apps. If somebody wanted to download the WellVia app, they could, but it was really quick to just go to your freshbenies app and click through to WellVia, access all of your services there, create, put in your medical profile, which I would agree, Kate, was so much easier than ever before. It takes just a few minutes to update. It's like drop down boxes, quick answers, not 25 screens, super smooth for that process alone. So that has been a really nice transition.
I know a lot of brokers have some anxiety over what will that transition be like. My people have gotten used to using Teladoc's version of FreshBenies. And what kind of experiences have you heard from those who are now who have transitioned? Not everybody was wide open to that, right?
Oh gosh, no. And I've had lots of conversations, and it's funny because now that we're headed into the second year with the partnership, there's a lot of questions that go, okay, now that you're a year in, tell me how it's going. Like, and we're like, oh my gosh, this has been so good. I have to tell you, and in all of my years in benefits, this is probably the first time I ever had this happen. Text from a broker, and she has one of my largest clients, and they transitioned to WellVia from Teledoc in January, and they were really, really nervous. They loved Teledoc. They love FreshBenies. In fact, the HR director brought FreshBenies into her new company every time she's changed. So they're fans. And so when we originally presented this to them, because they were looking to save some cost this year, I was like, okay, I don't really know if this is going to be a good option for you. I just want to be clear. Like, you guys love where you are. You're super happy. And she said, no, I think we want to do it. She said, as long as it's a good process and you guys make it smooth for us, I think it's going to be great. And so I got a text on a Sunday morning from the broker that said, good morning, Mandy. She said, I just want to give you this feedback about WellVia. She said, the app is awesome. It's so easy to use. 6 minutes from opening the app to getting a prescription and antibiotics sent to the pharmacy. And they sent her a coupon. And she said, 5-star service. I love it. And I was like, that is the best.
When we talk about a partnership with WellVia, we approached the team in December and January and said, we've really needed something a lot different than what we've done in the past with large groups, specifically groups of 200 plus. We needed a very focused telehealth offering that wasn't unlimited usage and that would grow in price as the usage grew to make it much more competitive in that space. And John, you answered the call on that. Your team just said it's not what we were originally doing with you, but let's do it, right?
Yeah, just going based on our conversations, or what I was speaking about earlier, having that direct phone line to each other to have a conversation. Through Mark's leadership, it's always been, well, let's not say no, let's have a conversation around it first and see how we can evolve this partnership and grow and make it stronger. One, we want you guys to win more business because it helps us and it helps the partnership. So through that leadership, we've been able to kind of, I wouldn't say pivot, but just tailor something, based on the market needs that you guys see.
Yeah. And we'll say thank you. That is launching here this spring, and we're super excited about it. The other part of that we saw was there was a lot of chatter in the marketplace to have a version of behavioral telehealth that didn't include a visit fee. Now, those of us on the group here, seeing the way that those interactions are occurring, we don't think that's necessarily the right move in the marketplace, especially when we realize that it's such low usage still in comparison to the amount of usage that we get on primary care, that it really doesn't make sense to effectively, what we see with some of the others is they're doubling the price of their product to have a 0 visit fee on behavioral telehealth. And so we had an idea about a different approach and giving an option that would allow the employer to be direct billed by FreshBenies for those visits. And your team answered the call. I know it wasn't something that you had done before. It was unique for us. But Mark, why did you say yes to that?
Yeah, because we want to be a good partner. When you look at partnerships, partnerships are really in my book about two things: fair terms. So it has to be fair on both sides of the fence, but more importantly, open communication. Both from whether it be a FreshBenies standpoint and the needs that you have, and from a WellVia standpoint of what we see in the marketplace of doing this work day in and day out, and what's viable and what's not viable. But ultimately, why we did it is we agree, because we do have the controls that we have internally. We're able to customize those plans and use those and use the experience and share the experience that we have. and other opportunities and best practices that we have. And that's where really special partnerships and things happen, when you have those exchanges and quite honestly, the courage to try, new things. And as our world has changed, certainly as it revolves, telehealth just in general, whether it be acute care or behavioral health, we do have to pivot. And we do have to change, and we have to introduce and be willing and accepting of new plan designs. I'm in agreement with you. I don't think no cost unlimited behavioral health is a great thing, because even though because at some point, the economics are a little different. Quite frankly, for our organization, the costs are different for an acute care provider versus a behavioral health provider. So there is a tipping point in running a business that you have to make some decisions. But the ability to have those costs taken on by an employer and divvied out by the employer is just another example of the flexibility and the freedoms that we bring to the table to make it as easy for distribution and brokers as possible. Because ultimately everybody wants to say yes, right? I want to say yes to everything that Fresh Bennies has to offer. Fresh Bennies wants to say yes to everything that either a broker or a client wants to offer. And ultimately, a broker wants to say yes to their client and that employer group in which they're serving. And so again, when that communication channel is wide open, it makes it a lot easier to say yes. And that's something that I'm very proud of our team for. And quite frankly, it's something I'm very thankful, Reed, with you and your team for, that since day one, 2 years ago, when the vetting process started, maybe even a little longer than that, and that's been paramount since day one. And John's done a fantastic job in nurturing that relationship and cultivating that relationship. And we're very appreciative of the trust we've been given to help you serve your clients, because that's the key. Ultimately, in these kinds of relationships, yes, it's a WellVia client, and that we're providing services for that employer group somewhere down that distribution chain. But ultimately, it's not, in our opinion. It's a Fresh Bennies client. It's a broker's client. And we want to make sure that that satisfaction and that stickiness and that awareness to listening to your client's needs is important.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for jumping on this today and sharing for our brokers here. It's been great. We look forward to so much more with you.
Thank you.